Alrighty. Oh, put the mic. Oh, whoops. Hold on. Gotta fix that. Is it? No, it's under. Okay, there we go. Hey, Socially Confused 07. Good to see you. Thanks for joining me this evening. All right, let me just move the mic in place. Okay, looks like audio is coming through nice and clear. I think I still have the delay thing taken care of. I don't think it got reset somehow. Awesome. Thank you, John Chavez. Okay. Oh, that's the other thing I need to do. I'm sorry. I'm running a little bit behind just because getting the kids off to bed and stuff. Just that. And sorry, I'm just still getting used to doing the whole YouTube thing, so it's a bit different than doing things on Twitch. And okay. Apologies for the delay. I should have had this already done, but I was getting the kids ready for bed. Okay. Live in control room. Okay. Oh, sorry, socially confused. I was talking about the I had a delay with the voice that I had been trying to mitigate. Okay, here we are. All right, now we are now ready. Hey, Shimpasta07, thanks for stopping by. All right, so welcome to episode 101 Dalmatians of the Pathfinders podcast. I am Trio311, your producer and host. Why do I look orangey on that one? I'm your producer and host of the Pathfinders podcast, where we are charting the way through all the nebulous information surrounding Star Citizen, Squadron 42, and their development. And tonight we are looking at the April 22nd Roadmap Roundup, and then I've got a Spectrum Pulse, where we are going to talk about the technology and features and lore that CIG can potentially use to combat griefing in Star Citizen, particularly of the murder hobo sort. And of course, it's not going to be an all-inclusive list or anything, but just looking at some things, trying to paint a picture of like how CIG can go about doing combating this, and how the game how the PU is going to change in ways that will attempt to address the issues surrounding griefing and people being murder hobos. But yeah, I haven't played Star Citizen this last week. I haven't even jumped into 4.7.2. I'm planning on doing that some this next week. I've been I I got my hooks into Winrose. If you have not checked it out, we have a private server courtesy of my friend Pumpkin Fury, available to us in my Discord. It is a great game. It is so much fun. It's Pirate Age of Sail. It's Valheim in the Caribbean during the time of Blackbeard. So it is just great fun. It's fun to play with others. It's fun to play solo. The base building is cool. The ship combat, it is very straightforward, but still fun. It's a big map to explore. There's sea shanties as you're sailing around on your ship. So I've got nothing but good things to say about it. And so if you're interested in joining me, I highly recommend it if you are interested in that sort of thing. But I will be getting back into playing some more SC because I've still got to continue my crusade to get the blueprints that I want and just do some more dabbling with crafting. John, yawn. Not for everybody, but I love Age of Stale type games. It's right. It's up there. It doesn't beat sci-fi and spaceships for me, but it's a close second. And not far behind that would be medieval castle sim type games, that sort of thing. But yeah, I will be getting back into SC this week. So if you're interested in joining me, I always post events in my Discord and everything. So I always try to group up with people if possible. It's just more fun that way. If you're not already in the Discord, would love to have you. Love to see you be a part of the conversation and maybe get to link up in game. Rehab of my shoulder is going pretty well. I've got almost all of my range of motion back. I'm probably 75, 80% there in terms of range of motion. It's still tender at times, especially if I inadvertently use it the wrong way or lift something with it. Still a little stiff in certain movements, but it's coming along. And I'm able to do most of my tasks of daily living, at least in a modified way. So that's good. Um, but yeah, if you haven't seen it and you're into that sort of thing, there was a leak that came out from the Bar Citizen in Xi'an, China. I haven't watched it. I've heard that it's difficult to hear the audio, but it is in English, and so people have transcribed it. But there's some good information from that leak. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, I would check it out. But how much of that information is going to be a part of the pre-recorded SCL that they played at I guess they played it at the Xi'an event, and it will be up on CIG's YouTube this week. Yeah, you like your ears were burning or something, or my ears were burning. Um, but yeah, we will be getting that SCL this week. I forget the what devs it was. Oh, I'm brain farting. Anyway, should be a good one. It was definitely a good one last time, so it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, let's go ahead and let's switch screens and we will get into the roadmap roundup for this evening. All right. So, roadmap roundup for April 22nd, 2026. Hello, everyone. Every 2 weeks, we accompany the roadmap update with a brief explanatory note to give you insight into the decision making that led to any changes. This is part of an effort to make our communications more transparent, more specific, and more insightful for all of you who helped make Star Citizen and Squadron 42 possible. Just a reminder, the 1.0 column showcases features and content planned for inclusion in or before Star Citizen 1.0, and that will be coming up in our discussion this evening. This means that you may not have to wait for the 1.0 release to experience them. As features and content in the 1.0 column become ready, they will migrate left into a point patch column for release. Be sure to check back every 2 weeks for the latest updates. With that, let's dive into this week's Roadmap Roundup. Notable changes. So, release view Alpha 4.7, Nyx Mission Pack 2. Introducing a second pack of missions to Nyx featuring hauling, combat, and salvage gameplay opportunities. Courier two-handed packages, so your 1/8 SU boxes, and I think that also includes little one-hand items that you have to deliver, or at least those were in the recover missions. So maybe not in the courier missions. The delivery, which is anywhere from 1 to 6 SCU in 1 SCU boxes. Hey, Danger Hobo 07, good to see you. Recover cargo, ship wave attack, bounty, kill ship, bombing run. Bombing runs are going to be in Stanton. I remember doing those in Pyro. Were they ever in Stanton before? Is that new? Paid salvage, lawful. And more. Hey, Aether Drift, 101 episodes. Congrats, man. Can't wait to stay. Can't stay for long as I live in Europe now, but I'll catch up on the VOD tree. Hey, no worries. And now we're on YouTube, Aether Drift. So yeah, I will. As always, the live VOD will be up there. I will re-upload it with some minor edits as well. So that way it's on the live page as well as on the videos page, and then there's of course the VOD on Twitch. But thank you for being a part of it, and thanks for coming and hanging out. Hey, Black Intellect, how you doing, buddy? 07, good to see you. That's weird. Hmm. I need to. Apparently, I need to change the chat thing on the screen because it isn't showing everything on the chat window. Huh. I hadn't noticed that before. Yeah, it's like cutting off at the bottom. I'll have to like resize it, I guess. I'm not sure. I'll have to play that later. Anyway, so the mission pack is set to release. I've heard some of the missions have been bugged, but then some of them are already getting fixed. So hopefully that all gets addressed sooner rather than later. Let's move on to Alpha 4.8. Finally, the Ultiflex Novia crossbow. This, it was already on there. They updated the image, but I just like, this has been waiting for so long. And they like did the art for it and everything, and they showed off the animations for it ages ago, but they couldn't bring it into game because they wanted the bolts to like persist. Hey, Parker 07, good to see you. They wanted the bolts to persist, and so they hadn't gotten around to making the tech work so that way that the bolts would go fuck and then stay there. Unlike bullets and stuff. So apparently they finally got that going, and it will be coming soon. So implement in 4.8, implementing the long-awaited crossbow. And so there was a promotion with Shroud of the Avatar. Is that the name of it? What was the name of the game that they partnered with? Three chevrons up, crossbows easy. Yeah. Someone MW8ZL? 07s. Yeah, I think it was Shroud of the Avatar is the name of the game. I'm brain farting. Why does CIG anti-family agendas? Why does CIG support anti-family agendas? What do you mean? I'm confused. But anyway, like way back when Chris Roberts and the developer of this other game, who he's friends with, they did a cross promotion to had things from the other games added into their games, and so that thing was the Ultiflex crossbow, and so like there was a special one with a special skin that was only for people who backed I think it was the Kickstarter or whatever for Shadow of the Avatar and vice versa. They added the Vanduul spear thing, whatever you want to call it. Oh, weird. That didn't update. Sorry, hold on. Docs. I updated it on OBS on my desktop. Okay, no, it's showing right. Okay, it just wasn't showing right on the chat on my laptop. Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that sounds right. Shroud of the Avatar. But so the people who backed Shroud of the Avatar will get the Ultiflex crossbow with like the special skin that goes with it, but of course it'll be available to everybody else without the special skin. Um, but implementing the long-weighted crossbow featuring a devastating shattering bolt and harsh projectile drop, the Ultiflex Novia crossbow, so very limited range, rewards skilled aim with immense power. Its near silent firing mechanism lets you strike quietly and gain the upper hand on your foes. So yeah, they updated the image for it. FPS weapons art refactor. Updating the visual material and textures for the following weapons and equipment. They've been doing this with almost every single patch. Um, yeah, I haven't heard anything about Shadow of the Avatar in forever. I never knew anything about that game. The Dead Rig Shotgun and Castek Arms Custodian, the Ravager, the Scalpel, the Coda, and the Devastator. So they're doing these art refactors, but I think they're also updating them so that way they will be ready for when they finally separate skins for guns from the gun itself. So they won't have you have to be an individual asset. So that'll be when that eventually happens. That'll be nice. 'Cause then we can get the digital license for the paint and just be able to apply it to anyone. As I talked about in SCL with I think it was the gameplay team with Rick Porter, Torsten. I forget the other guy's name. Oh, game came out and died since. Yeah, that probably why we don't hear about it. The flight suit Tailwind. I think this is the second flight suit that came out. Didn't one just come out in 4.7 as well? Implementing the Tailwind flight suit in the persistent universe. So they're starting to get these Tailwind flight suits, and I guess they're also bringing in some of the mechanics that go with the flight suits in terms of being able to do G-force resistance. So they're slowly starting to bring in stuff related to Starware. And so little tangent. There's been Grief for Net Victory. Thanks here. Hey, thanks here, Hot AO7. Thanks for stopping by. Um, uh, when people talk about Starware, everybody got all excited about Starware when they first showed it off a couple of years ago and everything. We've been waiting for it to get added into the game, added into the name or game. But Starware is not a new idea. It's not a new thing to Star Citizen. It's part of the game that was promised. Like they were talking about that, layering clothing and everything, and all that sort of stuff back in 2014 and 2015. It's like a 11, 12-year-old, idea. Um, so as part of researching for our Spectrum Pulse tonight on combating griefing and murder hoboing in general, I rewatched a couple of old vids from CIG on their RSI page that I hadn't watched in a long time. Just went on a tangent. Oh, I'll re-listen to this, and I was re-watching. It was the Persistent Universe Town Hall from 2015, which is like 3 hours long. It's three separate videos. And so much of what they talked about from back then, which wasn't even new at the time, a lot of it was stuff that they'd reiterated from other episodes of Around the Verse or other talks or things that they did on Spectrum. And so much of that is extremely relevant to what is in game right now or what is planned for 1.0 and beyond. Like, I need Star Wars so I can play Barbie. Yeah, like, and that's good. That's the funding model for CIG. going, forward, less ships, more Star Barbie and Star Interior Decorator, and monetizing that. Like, I don't know why I have to explain this to so many people, but they're with the amount of ownership that we will have in Star Citizen come 1.0, the amount of things that CIG can monetize for cosmetics and customization is just absurd. And like people are like, oh, the no, it's all about milking the whales. And it's like, no, it's about making a game that appeals to a large audience of people who will easily part with things from $1 to $10. Yeah. Customization is the true end game of for most MMOs. Yep. And when you can customize your character, your vehicles, your hangars, your habs, your apartments, your bases, your stations, like compared to things where all you can do is customize your character that make billions. Yeah, will Star Citizen never be as popular as Fortnite? No. But will Star Citizen have way more opportunities for customization and thus microtransactions? Yes, absolutely. Well, not waffling on anti-grieving. They just don't have the mechanics in place to do much about it. Like they don't want to do these piecemeal things to deal with it. They CIG always goes for the systemic approach, but and it's also not just a systemic approach, but it's a holistic systemic approach. So it's not just one system that will address griefing, and nothing's going to address griefing completely. There's always going to be those people that are that dedicated to griefing and being murder hobos that they will still do it. But what you're, with system design, you're going for, that balance of, where um, good is no longer or perfect. Uh, uh, Good is no longer the enemy of perfect. Perfect is no longer the enemy of good. You want it so good enough that it does the job, for the majority of situations, but not go so far overboard that it hurts the rest of the game. Yeah. Well, and let's see. Hot take nobody asked for. Racing suits, then flight suits, and only available in web store. Pay to win, just like flight blades. Oh, jeez. Salesing. Yeah. Oh man. The previous episode 100 was my hot take on the Odin. Um, CIG rarely makes me angry. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. Not only am I disappointed in the way they went with the Odin, I'm pissed about it. It's so dumb. It is such a stupid, stupid, stupid idea. And Salty Mike had it right. It's such a CIG thing to do. And, I was really hoping that they wouldn't be so dumb and shallow about it. But here we are, and I hope that CIG gets slapped in the face by the greater gaming community for doing such a stupid thing and selling the battle cruiser, selling something so massive and so new to the verse, um, at this late stage in the game, when you're trying to market it to a wider audience, trying to market Squadron, like you fucking morons, you idiots. CIG loves money, but the Odin, other than selling it to make money, doesn't make any sense. It makes zero sense. Because when you think about how many they'll sell and how much money it makes them and how they have no need for that paltry amount of money that they'll get from selling a big ship, it, it's it's such a shoot yourself in the foot. It's just ridiculous. With how many they'll sell and how much money they'll make them, compared to how much money they've been making, not selling gargantuan ships that will cost thousands of dollars. And like there's no precedent for it. None. None whatsoever. But that was episode 100 of the podcast. Go watch it. Read the citations for yourself. I made that argument. I was hoping that CIG would be aware of their own history to be like, yeah, let's not sell this. Let's make it gameplay. Let's make it content because that will drive more sales than selling it ever would. But, they're short-sighted and stupid. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, they offer Idrises and javelins for credit, but they sell out instantly. And so, like now the war bond ones, for the Idrises, the Javelins, and the Krakens still take a while to sell out if they sell out. Like that's how I was able to get my Idris, is because instead of trying to do the F5 war for a melt, I just bought a credit one and I had no issue getting one. Like I bought one like 15 minutes after they went on sale, and they weren't sold out for a while after that. Like um and that's why like the Odin, I'm like they'll make several hundred thousand, maybe a million or two on it, which is nothing compared to the fact that they're making like 150 million. They made almost 100 in in ship sales alone. They made almost 150 million dollars last year, which means they probably grossed close to 170 between ship sales, other income, and subs, which is just crazy. And this year they are on track to break that. They're already well ahead of it. Oh yeah, well yeah, War is Heck. It may not sell out. It may take a while. But I mean, I also think that they're not going to sell. They won't make as many available as they do the Idrises and the Javelins. They make fewer Javelins available than they do Idrises. Well, why wouldn't they make fewer Odins available than Javelins? Yeah. Um, but yeah, let's get back to the roadmap roundup. Hopefully, we will see more about Starware before the end of this year. See more of those differentiations in the gear, so that because they are working on suit lockers. They are working on suit lockers. It's in active development right now. And so if suit lockers are in active development, hopefully that means that Starware is not too far away, because that's going to be the suit lockers are going to be an important thing of being, I'm going to fly around in this this gear, but then if I land planet side, I'll have this in my suit locker, but then I'll have another set of gear in storage for if I'm going to be going EVA or what have you. Oh yeah, it's for the whales, but again, I think just putting something in game for sale just for the sake of whales is stupid. You know, again, that watch episode 100. If you watch episode 100 and you look at the citations, and you still think that it makes perfect sense for them to sell it, I'm like, I don't know what to say, what else to say to you, because this is something that CIG is. It's like what's the point? Why would you do this to your marketing, to your image at this point in the game, for what to them, compared to last year and this year and even before that, is really a paltry sum. you know well, that's the thing, is they have to know that their bad reputation, they have to start taking it seriously leading up to 1.0, and more importantly leading up to Squadron 42. If when people go Googling and looking up Star Citizen and Squadron, that's what comes up. It will turn people off and it will hurt sales. And you can't be doing that for something that's like such a short-term little blip on the financial radar to them. Yeah, to get the battle cruiser or have the opportunity to buy it, it has to be a sad, sobering country ballad. Yeah. Anyway, item recovery, vehicle loadouts. This part's really interesting because this is like the first iteration of this, and more will be coming to follow up behind it. Exactly. Yes. Socially confused. Exactly. If you have people like screaming like they're selling a $5,000 ship, this game's pay to win, it's a scam, all they do is cater to whales, you know, a lot of that noise is going to detract from you getting your message out about Squadron. Like I don't see how people can think that it won't, that it might not drown it all out, but it's a distraction. It's an unnecessary distraction. Well, and that we talked about that in the when I was streaming the other night, but the adage of all press is good press is a farce. That is only true in certain niche contexts, regarding like actors and actresses trying to get back into the public eye. That does not work for companies trying to market a product. That does not work for corporations who live and die by their reputation and their sales. Um, you know, uh, it might generate views and interest, but like it's all this stuff has kept people away from CIG, and they've been working so hard to change their image, all of last year being about stability and playability. Playability was a mixed bag, but they did squash a lot of fucking bugs. But there's a lot of new things that's, that we're still having a lot of trouble. But the game, on the back end was still ridiculously stable, and they made a ton of content, and they needed to stay on that train. Don't get off. Don't stop here, sell Odin, and then try and get back on. No, don't lose momentum. Yeah. Oh God, yeah, Parker. Yep. Amber Heard might beg to differ. Well, that's a very specific thing, but like that has always been a saying that's more for um the entertainment in for entertainers. It's not for corporations. It's not for corporations and especially their products. But item recovery vehicle loadouts is really interesting, and I've been reading the Evocati and PTU patch notes regarding it, and it's a obviously it's not the full um, item recovery thing. Like we're not getting all of item recovery tier one, but like they're adding they're starting to add things up to get us to tier one, and then so on. And so I think this is a really good first step. Um, and actually this kind of plays into griefing and murder hoboing, but adding the ability for players to save and claim vehicle loadouts via the ASOP terminals. Claimed vehicles and their components will now be bricked after some time. Includes a major refactor of the entitlement service and extension of the item imprint system to ensure player-owned vehicles persist reliably. So the entitlement service is what everything that is on your hanger on the CIG page, the Robert Space Industries page, that is your entitlements. And so they are expanding the use of the entitlement database and updating the entitlement database to be so that way things that they want to persist will persist. Um, yeah, it's socially confused. I'm totally with you. It's um, this not being the end state. I totally get you, because like I want to salvage components and I want to be able to use things. But I get where it's coming from, because you will have to pay to warranty that loadout. Like, and so if it's going to cost you money, and so the more high end your components and stuff, what have you, are, the higher tier, the higher quality and stuff, the more it's going to cost you for them to be warranted. And so people aren't going to, warranty everything. They'll warranty some things, but not everything. And then, so that money is meaningless right now. It's not always going to be that way though. And so like, yeah, it's this isn't the full thing, but like this is one of those things. This is one of those money sinks. This is one of those UEC sinks that are going to be part of the game, and people will have to choose what they want to warranty. People will have to choose and be picky about what they claim, because rather than just claiming it and getting it back, if you claim it, if you warranty it, then you have to pay the money, and then if you claim it, like there's other things that go into that. But that just means that those items will be bricked, but you can just go back and get your ship if it's intact. Like that's part of the 1.0 presentation. You get a free ride back to back to your ship if it's intact, to get your ship back. If you die, you know, um, or you go back in another ship and pick it up and everything, but there's going to be a cost to this on both sides. But then you can also get those components, and if you have the reputation you need, you can put those back into service. Yeah. Oh yeah, prices, everything's prices are going to get balanced. How much you earn is going to get balanced. But I'm just glad to see this step coming in, so that way, if people, don't want to pay the money, they don't have to pay the money. But it prevents duping, but it still allows you to, at least, yeah, we can't salvage the components and turn around and use them, if they're going to get bricked. Um, if they get bricked again, but you can still dismantle them for the materials. So if you find a good component, that means you can get good materials from it. And eventually, if you had the reputation, you can get that, you can pay to have that component restored, and then you can use it. So everything's going to have a cost. There's a lot of player agency and such. It's not it's not the full item recovery system, but in a way it makes sense, because like I didn't pay to have the oh gosh, what do they call the locks on your vehicle, so that way you can push a button on an app on your phone and it disables your car. What's that called? But like, yeah, LoJack. Yeah, LoJack kill switch. That's essentially what this is. You can pay extra to put a LoJack on your ship, and you can pay even more to put a LoJack on your ship. But you will pay more to LoJack things that are not your standard components. And so, like, if you want to have the LoJack system on there, so that way people can't get your stuff and you can get it back, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you a lot of money. Think about, like, if the if your car insurance, if you paid to LoJack your car, and somebody steals your car, and then it freaking breaks and they can't use it because you LoJacked it and you did the kill switch, but then they set it on fire just to spite you, and you can't go recover the things. Well, the insurance has to pay. If you put that LoJack system on all your upgraded parts for your Subaru, your off-road truck, or what have you, that makes your insurance go up. It's the same thing in game. And so if you are choosing to upgrade your ship, and then choosing to, upgrade your LoJack, and as well as be able to get your things back, to have those items be warranted, because remember, warranty and insurance are different. Insurance just gives you the money for the items. Warranty gives you the item back itself. No, Subgenius, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you will pay money in game to get those things back, if you want to get them back. That's how this works. It's essentially a simplified gamification of what you can do in real life, and how insurance would work in real life, and if you want to get your stuff back. Like, if I wanted to change my auto insurance, so that way if someone stole my truck, I would be able to get my truck gun back, a brand new truck gun. It would cost me more money. If I upgraded my truck and put a whole bunch of aftermarket parts in there, and I wanted to get those aftermarket parts replaced when I get a new truck, and not just get my stock 2021 Titan back, it would cost me more money than what I pay right now. So it's the same thing in game, except for, and so, like, you're going to have to choose, do you want to pay that extra money in game to be able to get those things back, rather than, just take the L. Yeah, socially confused. Well, that's the analogy I make it with Paul, on a captain's table, like, every time we talk, because it's um Paul always, he does, it's not even a joke, but like, the Star Citizen universe is a dystopia. In the UEE, we have it's a blend. There's multiple different healthcare systems, but there's for-profit healthcare, there's insurance, there's public healthcare systems that are shitty. There's, insurance for your vehicles and your stuff. Like, you can up the 7 SA shields from. Ooh, that's a big jump. Yeah. So like the item recovery vehicle loadouts is a good first step that allows us to start testing, because that's the big part is they have developed um, they have done this major refactor of the entitlement service and the imprint. They have developed the imprint system. The imprint system is what allows you to imprint items to give player ownership. Player ownership is a card on the 1.0 roadmap, and so this is the first iteration to test out these tech developments that they've been working on. And so they're doing a limited rollout of the next part of item recovery in order to test this and see how it works and get it working before they further develop it. Everything is iterative. So, maybe in 4.9, 4.10, we see more stuff related to item recovery changes come along. But again, this is not a single system in isolation. This is a holistic system. They have to build out the guilds and, build out the mechanics for being able to unbrick things. We have to get the rest of the blueprints for components and stuff all in game. So that way, even if it's bricked, you can dismantle it. Obviously you'll still be able to sell the things and make money off of them. And like they said, if it's a crafted component and higher quality, you get more money for it. So, yep, exactly, Blacking, like 100%. Yeah. Mike Lansing is live over on YouTube as well. I mean, minus however much restream delay there is between OBS and restream. Oh man, 32 people in chat between YouTube and Twitch hanging out. Really appreciate the support, guys. Sorry, I wasn't even watching that. I can't wait until I can insure my Drake hat and then brick it. Yeah, someone tries to put it on and it just goes bleep, 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 bleep. It just falls off. Yeah, Subgenius. Well, and so that's how insurance works. There's insurance and then there's warranties. And so you can, if you insure something, you get the money back for it. If you warranty it, then you get the actual item back, whether it's a ship or components on the ship and such. Um, and so warranties, you get a warranty for your pledge items, so your ships and their stock components. But then if you upgrade your components on your ship, you don't necessarily get to, get a warranty for all those upgrades. That's something that you have to obtain. That was part of the 1.0 presentation with Richard Tyler. So if you're not aware of that, I highly recommend going back and watching it. I know it's a lot of information, but it's worth your time to understand these things. Yep, Jaded Cynic, stock insurance versus custom, premiums and such. Yeah, well, and you'll be able to choose whether you want to insure your knickknacks and stuff. Like right now, it's just your loadout, but potentially, you'll be able to say, okay, I want this whole thing back how it was. And if you want, that's your choice. Go for it. Oh, did somebody? Oh, hold on. Are my sound alerts not on? What the? Oh, that stuff doesn't show up in. Holy shit. That for some reason that doesn't show up in
part of the crew.
Oh, it was in Restrip.
Part of the crew.
Well, why did that one do it?
Part of the crew. Part of the man. Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
Hey, Escape 907, thank you so much for gifting those subs. You are so generous. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
That's just fucking teamwork.
Yep. Okay, now I'm confused. Okay, because where'd it go? Okay, so that I do I not have a sound alert set up for? Oh, I must not have a sound alert set up for gifting subs? Huh. Because when a single person subs, I get a sound alert for that. And so I didn't get alerted because that didn't come over in the restream chat in OBS. Okay, I'm gonna have to, yeah, now stack up that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to work on addressing that. But Escape, thank you so much for gifting those subs. I really appreciate it. It's super generous of you. There's 23 people watching on Twitch right now. We got 15 people watching on YouTube. Oh sevens, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great night. Um, but yeah, so I'm always raising money for Stack Up. I donate all my uh, monetization from Twitch and YouTube to stackup.org. If you want to learn about StackUp, you can put exclamation point charity and exclamation point StackUp in chat. You can see the donation link if you wanted to donate directly to StackUp via the Tiltify. Um, yeah, Paul's sick. I guess he's feeling better. He just sounds like crap and he keeps coughing. So hopefully Paul feels better soon because I was actually going to watch his show earlier and call in while I was cooking. But yeah. Hey, Commander Mustang oh 07. Yep. Yeah, exactly. That is one of the things we're going to be talking about. Um, yeah, the flu at the moment is so much fun. Ugh, my twins both had the flu at the end of last week, into the weekend, and that turned into double ear infections for both of them. So my daughter started her ear infections started becoming symptomatic on Sunday, and my son, youngest son, was on Monday. They were miserable. We went through so much Motrin and Tylenol. Oh my God. And now they're both on antibiotics for it. It was, earlier this week was rough. Oh man. Yeah, they are virus wet dreams. Yeah, and I've got a 4-year-old and twin, almost 2-year-olds. But yeah, I'm excited for the progress that we're making on item recovery. I think I'm probably with the majority of the community when item recovery tier 0 came out, and we were just getting everything back, and you couldn't loot. And I know it was helpful for a lot of people based off the state of the game, but I'm a looter. That's my gameplay. A lot of people, that's their gameplay, and it was really frustrating to not have it taken away. And so I'm glad that we're finally making some progress, um, in the right direction. Why does Twitch say unstable? Hmm. Sorry, I'm just looking at huh, weird. Yeah, it did kill the joy of looting. It was nice, but I think the game stability wise is in a place where for the most part, we really don't need it. It's going to cause some pain here in a little bit, but where I think we're making enough progress this year where it's time to start pulling off the band-aid. Yeah, you can loot off NPCs, but like, I can't tell how many times I found dead players in locations that I didn't even kill them. I just wandered around. Oh, look, that's a body. That is definitely not an NPC. And you can't take their stuff. You know, oh, geez. Hype chess. Okay. But yeah, that is the Roadmap Roundup for April 22nd. And so let's see. That was last Wednesday. So we've got another roadmap coming up this next Wednesday on the 6th. And it should also be a monthly report Wednesday. So next episode of the podcast will be a whole bunch of good development news. Looking forward to doing that. But let's go ahead and we're going to do a quick screen change just so I have the neat timestamp. And then we'll change back to this screen to get started with our Spectrum Pulse for the evening on how CIG can combat griefing. What the heck? That was weird. My laptop just randomly connected to my headphones on its own out of nowhere. And it's been on for like 2 hours. Yeah, G Cube, that's a good point. Yep, your buddies being able to grab your stuff without just having to grab your entire body and track it around or something. Yeah, and, Commander Mustang, that's a good point because like there's a lot of missions that you can do to farm better components. Um, and like, will those become bricked? I don't know. I don't know what they've said about NPCs, about NPC ships. But yeah. Oh, I need to show transcript. There we are. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and switch screens. We'll get into the Spectrum Pulse. Alrighty. So, this evening, so this got started because I was on Captain's Table last month, earlier last month, with Paul.
Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Hey,
Part of
Commander
the crew,
Mustang, thanks so much for the call. Really
Part of the
appreciate it.
crew, part of the ship.
And I always, whenever I go on Captain's Table or on the Launch Sequence podcast with Space Tomato, I always check it out after the fact, just to look at the comments and reply to the things, see if I can clarify some of my positions, share information if people are like, wait a minute, what? I'll drop a link and stuff. But one of the comments that I noticed in the Captain's Table podcast that I did with Paul is and he wasn't the only one. But it was in regards to, we got off on a tangent regarding Death of a Spaceman because someone brought it up in chat and I had to correct them because they were wrong. But someone, multiple people were talking in the comments about how people will, still shoot escape pods, shoot, ejected players and stuff. They'll still, finish off your ship and stuff like that. And it made me realize that a lot of people really don't understand CIG's holistic approach to solving problems like this. And they are missing the forest for the trees on the different levers that CIG can pull in ways that make sense within their universe to combat griefing and murder hoboing. And so I wanted to talk about some of those things and how they sort of connect in regards to where we're going to be when we get to 1.0, and the steps, along that route that will help to address griefing. Yeah, an escape pod isn't a threat. Yeah, that's a good point. Because I think people are, like straight up myopic about this because it's the way it's been for so long, and they can't wrap their heads around the game being different than what we've been playing. People have a hard time adjusting to change, and they have a really hard time imagining change when they've been subjected to the way the game is for so long. And so that's why CIG makes changes. People act like they're really big changes, but a lot of times they're small little iterative changes, so that way it's not so, it's more of the frog in the pot of boiling water versus he's sitting in there and then you turn on the heat versus you drop him in there when it's already boiling and he hops right out. Obviously they're not trying to cook us, um, but there's a lot of different things that CIG can implement, is going to implement that will help to address griefing. Well, my mod Northern Trooper just shared something with me. Oh, geez. Speaking of griefing, yep. Here, what? We'll just watch it. We'll see what this is real quick. Oh, yep, he went uncoupled, pointed it at something. He's gonna bail out, max out the velocity, and blam! There you go. And another one. Just griefing dot chips. Yep. That is actually something we wanted to be talking about. Because people don't realize that CIG has a solution for this. And it's been planned for a long time. So, that actually brings up a great point. Thanks so much for sharing that, Northern Dreamer. Is there one audio on this, or is it just not running? Oh, it's gonna do. Oh, did my headphones get disconnected from my desktop? Oh, weird. Okay, so at least you guys could hear it. That's strange. Okay. So let's go ahead and close that. So first things first, this is for, and a lot of this ties into the 1.0 presentation. Um, yeah, an inventive pad RAM. Yeah, it wasn't even a pad RAM. It was a docking collar RAM. Uh, yeah, you'll never be able to completely stop everybody. But, that, like, I'm a systems design guy. Um, and what I do, a lot of what I do in my job is I've helped, I review clinical evidence, and then I find a way to create a system of care that puts the best evidence into practice in order to get the best results. And, we're never going to be able to get 100% prevention of this or 100% first pass success of that, or, whatever. But the idea is to, utilize a holistic approach, utilizing multiple different avenues, different methodologies to address things from a holistic standpoint to get as close to perfect as is reasonable given the amount of effort you can put into it, but also without having negative sequelae, secondary sequelae that are cause more harm than good, essentially. So the first thing, and this one's kind of obvious, but we talked about this. The first thing is NPC security. So I'm pretty sure I got the timestamp right. Hopefully I did. Um, let's listen to what I think it's Richard Tyrer's talking right here about the about the law system and security and how that will work out.
Game PvE content. But what about PvP? What about player versus player content? As you know, 1.0 will contain 5 star systems, 3 of these being lawful in Stanton, Castra, and Terra, and 2 of them being unlawful in Pyro and Nyx. So what's the difference? Let's take a look at Stanton. Lawful systems will be a mixture of high, medium, and low security areas. Each of
Sorry, had my mic on mute. JJ did type buckle. Yeah. So this is just a visual representation. Obviously, it's not meant to be perfectly accurate or anything like that, because the system itself isn't perfectly accurate. But you can superimpose what a map like this would look like over the map of Stanton, given that your distance is, as you get further away from the planets and the infrastructure, you have longer response times. You're further away from security forces. So as you get out in the black of space, it will take longer for them to get there. They're still coming. Security is still coming. It will just take longer for them to get there. But that's the part that people just can't wrap their heads around, is that security will still come if you are in Stanton, you're out here. It's just going to take longer. That's part of why the time to kill is going away in favor of time to disable. And so we're going to look more at that in a little bit, because the longer you can survive until help arrives, the less of an issue somebody being a griefer or a murder hobo is, because help can come, not only NPCs, but also players. Again, the beacon system. We're getting a big update to the beacon system, and being able to use a beacon to have an NPC come and refuel you, to have an NPC respond to your beacon. you guys know that we can use beacons to call for aid, right? This is coming. So let's hear about what the rest of Rich had to say.
These areas will be monitored by law enforcement agencies, and depending on the location, would dictate the emergency response time, with high-sec areas being the fastest. Initially, this response will be measured, but over time will escalate to overwhelming force. This means if someone is attacked, if they can just hold out for a short duration, help will be on the way. Pirates will be able to disrupt this monitoring by shutting down the nearby comm arrays, but this will be highlighted in your star map, with dynamic missions being generated to bring it back online. But this is the PvP you already know and experience right now, just without security forces. But before we jump into an unlawful system, let's explore what options you have if you pirate a ship.
Remember, this is all run by Star Citizen. Again, a systemic solution. They don't want to create the reason we don't have this in game right now is because they don't want to create a half-ass system, an interim, when they know that they're going to have the full-fledged system to run security and stuff. Star Sim will be hooked into the security service, will be hooked into the mission system in order to say that this has happened. We need to generate a mission for this, and this is where the security NPCs are, and they're getting dispatched over here, and the threat has gone up, and so now we need to send more of them, send bigger ones, all that. Yeah, the trooper. Yep. Yeah, it's similar. It's a more in-depth way of how everybody should know how GTA works. And most people have probably played a GTA game at some point in your life. And the more of a problem you are, the more force comes after you, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, go full ass. You never use your half ass. Go full ass. All right, let's keep. Let's see his ownership. Let's. Is it here? No. But yeah, so that's the. Now, obviously, if you are in Pyro, you're not going to have NPC security coming. They're not going to be law enforcement organizations. But depending on your rep, will determine who might come to help you. You'll still be able to put out a beacon for help, and if you have the rep, a gang, with a gang, they might be able to come help you depending on where you are. Yeah, exactly. Local factions will come to help you. That's a thing. Headhunters, CFP. There's gonna be more factions. It's not. They didn't just retcon everything and remove all those factions. The game wasn't ready for it, so they didn't include them. They kept it more simple. And so it's not just that only applies to Stanton and Terra and Castra. No, it applies, it similarly, but different to Nyx and Pyro, and by extension, other systems like them post 1.0. But again, if you don't have the rep, you might be shit out of luck. And so that's why rep is so important. People think, oh, well, rep isn't important right now. It's never going to be rep important. It's like, no, we have rep 1.0. It's a limited introduction system. They got it out there so that they could see that how, make sure it functions, but it has a limited feature set, just like the mission system right now has a limited feature set. And that's why we can only get missions of a certain type and scale. Well, we're getting mission system V2. We're getting reputation system V2. All these things are being iterated on and further developed to have to be much more robust to allow for the game that they said they wanted to build to be able to be built. And so, we saw the We were just actually talking about ownership and stuff. But, I think a lot of people just forgot this image even exists, and for, don't realize that it also applies in a similar way to Pyro and Nyx. Um, but yeah, and this is not new. It is similarly, they've shown off images like that before in the star map. You can go into, let's see, we'll go into Stanton. And you can turn on the threat. And you can see there's zones of threat around the planets because that's where the majority of the targets are, and the shipping routes in between the planets and the jump points, the planets and the stations. Obviously, it tapers off and such, but that's where the threat is. But then, if you remember the quantum presentation way back when they were using the star map via hex to show how this stuff works, not only is there more threat here because there's more targets, but there's also more security. And the security being coming from that planet means they have a very short response time to this area right here. And it gets a little bit longer, but they be coming, if you remember seeing the security moving along these routes, and clustering around here, but also moving along these routes, that's how StarSim will manage the law enforcement and security in a system. Law and security. This is a card from the 1.0 roadmap. Law and security, implementing an updated system that handles law infractions along with security responses to criminal activity. Sorry, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in chat because there's 42 people in chat between Twitch and YouTube. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate the support. Again, oh gosh, who was it that gifted all those subs? That was just so awesome. Sorry, scrolling up. Ghost in the Machine Works, they are not cash poor. Sorry, I'm scrolling up looking for that name, but Escape was the one who gave away all those, gave those gift subs. But CIG is not cash poor. CIG has a giant nest egg from the investors that is earmarked for platform and marketing. Like they talked about that in the 2023 annual report, that they use some of that money for CitizenCon and the increased platform costs and updates due to the massive increase in players over that year. But then they made a giant profit last year, which means, and they were profitable in 2024. The 2023 one. And so they have since ostensibly put back into that nest egg. But that's what that money's for. It didn't go anywhere. That was still $45 million, and then they made like a several $1 million profit in 2004, and then they made probably $40+ million, maybe more, in 2025. CIG isn't cash poor right now. Now, there's a difference between the money, I forget what the verbiage is, but the money that they have on hand versus the money that came from the investors that's earmarked for those things. And so their operating revenue, they only keep only have several million, locked up in the bank, just to be able to, have enough liquidity. But that reserve fund from the investors, that's what that's for, and that's still there, still available. But yeah, so the law and security system, like Richard Tower was just talking about, that's part of 1.0. That's why I was in the 1.0 presentation. And so someone, if you are getting attacked, someone will come to help. If you're around a space station and you get attacked, it'll get witnessed and someone will be there real quick. Yeah, Monster. Yep. Yeah, so the law and security, this is going to make a big difference. But again, this is the security system. And having a whole bunch of NPC security running around responding to all of this stuff and managing it all, and building a temporary system, in lieu of the real system that they're going to be implementing, would be a whole lot of work that would delay development on that eventual system, as well as negatively impact other development. And so we've just had to make do with not having this. We used to have NPCs respond but now that they haven't, that hasn't worked in ages. But it's going to come back. It's part of the road to 1.0. But again, this is part of a holistic system, so we're going to see a few other things that tie into that. So this part, we're going to watch several minutes of this regarding how Maelstrom works. This is a huge part of what they just said regarding you just have to stay alive long enough and someone will come to help you. Well, we had the faux armor system in that's still taking a whole lot of balance. That's a stepping stone to Maelstrom. Maelstrom is a card on 1.0. It's part of 1.0. We will have Maelstrom in game before 1.0. And that's what's going to make it so that way your ship, not only along with engineering, which is going to require more tuning, isn't even close to being done yet. But that will make it so that way you're not only does your ship not just blow up, your power plant just go boom, but instead of coming apart into preset pieces where your ship just falls apart, it will fall apart a little bit at a time instead of just catastrophically falling apart and exploding. And that won't kill you. You'll have more time to escape. You'll have more time to, for help to come get you. You'll have more time to fight back. And so the ability for murder hobos to quickly do what we just watched on that video that Northern Troopers shared is going to be negatively impacted, by Maelstrom, by the flight model. What they just did will not be possible in the new flight model. You won't be able to just, set a course at 1,000 meters per second, and go straight to, not without super tuning your ship and everything, but you also won't even be able to approach a station like that. We'll get into that. But let's look at Maelstrom so that way you guys can see how ships will actually break apart later on and what that means for your survivability in terms of escape pods as well as the cockpit of your ship.
Next, I would like to introduce Maelstrom, our physically based destruction system. And I would like to do that with a video that I believe speaks for itself. See the water splashes? We want players' intuitive prediction of the effect a weapon or a collision has to actually happen in the engine or in the game. So we decided to move away from hit point pools or other abstract models to simulate damage, but rather have damage be calculated from a physical model and from the physical material properties of each entity. If something breaks off due to its structural integrity degreasing below a certain threshold, Maelstrom allows it to break off in a realistic fashion. If you shoot off a wing, the missiles and weapons on that wing should still remain attached. If the broken off part still has power, electric items should still function. This means Maelstrom was needed to be designed to work with a hierarchical setup to begin with. From the hierarchical representation of the geometry we want to break off to the same hierarchy on a higher level for items like power plants, lights, weapon systems, and so on. Maelstrom is persistence and networking ready. We designed it from the ground up to work with high latency situations, to persist and replicate easily. To achieve all this, we gave each physical geometry instance an identifier to be able to uniquely identify it within the universe. So your Gladius wing is your Gladius wing. We added physical material and damage properties that can now be replicated across the network. One of them, and that's the most important one, we call integrity. And this determines how much structural or internal integrity a physical geometry has. Integrity is modified from dissipating, or rather absorbing, energy from kinetic impacts or energy weapons, and also in the future from absorbing energy from external factors like extreme temperature or fire, as you've seen before. We also track which physical part or geometry belongs to which visual geometry and which high-level entity. So if the structural or internal integrity collapses, we know which visual geometry is affected and which item might be affected as well. So a power plant will cease to emit power or implode, explode. A weapon will cease to fire, and so on. To make things break apart, we create what we call breakable clusters. A breakable cluster is a set of physical geometry, the visual geometry, and the entities on top that can break off. Between breakable clusters, we create abstract cantilever beams to be able to model stress and strain. I'll go into more detail in that in a bit. Breakable clusters are hierarchical. They mirror the hierarchy of all attached entities involved. They also embed the hierarchy of all animated joints. And they also embed the hierarchy of all physical geometries. They essentially represent a ground truth of the entire hierarchy necessary to perform all our goals for Maelstrom. This image is showing a breakable cluster graph of the Gladius. I'd like to show one more video of Maelstrom before we continue.
Sorry guys, my bad. So you guys saw how the Gladius broke up into a whole bunch of little itty bitty pieces because it had a huge force on it, from flying at high speed into a freaking building. But it broke up into a whole bunch of tiny pieces, and it's not like that in game right now. Obviously, you take damage to a wing, and the wing will eventually just break off. The whole freaking thing. So if you're in a dogfight and you're getting shot, your ship will essentially slowly come apart, as it takes more, absorbs more and more energy from ballistic rounds, or the integrity of it continues to get degraded due to energy weapons. But it'll slowly come apart. And what people don't recognize from this is that they can make it so your ship comes apart, but everything else will come apart but the cockpit. Everything else will come apart but the escape pods. They can make it so that way the material properties of the cockpit and your escape pods on your ships are incredibly durable. So that way, your Gladius will come apart and then it will no longer register on radar or sensors or anything like that, but the cockpit will still be there and you'll still be sitting in it. This happened in game, mostly due to a bug, when we were, it was probably a month or so ago. But one of my friends was flying, I want to say it was an F8 or maybe it was an F7A. But he took it was, oh gosh, what event was it that we were doing? Someone was in an Ares Ion, and his shields were nearly down, and he took I think it was an F7A, and he took an ion shot, like straight to the ship, and basically the ship exploded, just came apart at the seams. But he was still alive. Like we all thought he died because we saw his ship just come apart right in front of us because the guy in the Ares Ion was aiming for, I think it was a reclaimer, and he was aiming for the reclaimer and he accidentally flew in front of his, one of the guys on our team, and he took the ion shot. But his shirt just came apart and like, oh man, that sucks. Okay, well, either claim that ship. I think he was a new player, so he was borrowing a ship, and I think one of us was going to come and get him. But what ended up happening? He's like, no, I'm not dead. Well, what do you mean you're not dead? We just watched your ship explode. How are you not dead? He's like, I'm in the cockpit. It's spinning around. All the lights are turned off. And so we flew over to where we, saw his ship blow up. And here's the cockpit of the ship just slowly rotating away, and then it came to a stop because that's what debris does, but slowly rotating and spinning away from where his ship blew up. And we were able to see him alive in the cockpit. But because the ship was disabled, he couldn't eject out of the cockpit. He was stuck in there, but he was alive. He was just fine. And so we ended up bringing a Connie over that we had available, and we opened up the cargo bay and we pulled it pulled the cockpit in via a tractor beam, and it was bugged and everything like that. But as soon as we pulled it into the cargo bay, the cockpit disappeared and he was there and alive in the ship because he survived the destruction of the ship. Well, that will be a very, that'll be, Maelstrom is meant to make it so that way that is a very normal thing. It's meant to make it so that way your cockpit survives all that damage. Your ship will break apart. Your ship will break apart and fall apart and essentially look kind of like it exploded, but without the big kaboom. But this is gamification of what happens in aircraft in real life. The A-10 Warthog, the cockpit, it's like an armored bathtub because there's all this armor around the pilot in order to keep the pilot alive. A lot of aircraft do that where they put armor and plating and protection around the pilot in order to keep the pilot or the crew alive. My Blackhawks, when we go overseas, have armor added around the cockpit, below the cockpit, and below the crew compartment in order to protect us from enemy fire. And like rounds will penetrate the other parts of the aircraft and they'll damage the components and everything like that. But it's meant to stop, a pretty good sized bullet in order to keep you alive. Even though the aircraft might itself break, it's meant to keep you alive. Well, that's what Maelstrom is meant to do. It's meant, to make it so that way your ship breaks apart. It does it more slowly. It increases the time to disable. But then if somebody keeps on shooting you, all that's going to happen is your ship will continue to break apart even though it's fully disabled. So if they really want to, get the pilot kill, they're going to have to, the ship will break apart, or become disabled, and then it'll drop off sensors, and then they'll have to find it and be like, okay, where is it? And then they'll have to keep shooting it. They have to keep shooting it and break it apart until they finally, are able to shoot the cockpit, and then the cockpit will be able to take, more damage than any other parts of the car in order to keep you alive. And all that time, the clock is ticking. If you have requested help, somebody is on their way. And so if they stick around to do that, they're running the risk of reinforcements coming and, and fighting them, potentially killing them, and, either or taking them into custody, disabling them, whatever you want to say. And that's why part of why we're doing this in this sequence, because the security system is coming. The security system is going to have more time to come with Maelstrom and engineering. Obviously, we already have engineering in game, but with Maelstrom, they're going to have more time to come. And if you are a griefer, if you're a murder hobo and you get charged with murder, you're not going to Klesher. Yeah, we're going to have different jails in game. Klesher is like your county jail. It's where minor infractions go. Ultimately, you're going to go to Quarterdeck. Quarterdeck is the San Quentin of the Star Citizen universe, except for it's not on the San Francisco Bay. It's out in the middle of fucking nowhere. And so if you're a murder hobo and you do happen to murder someone, and get charged with that, you are able to finally destroy an escape pod full of people who abandoned ship out of their or their 890. You did the I forget what they call it, but it's in the lore where like it is a you shall not shoot. It's kind of like you don't shoot people who are the other pilots who are parachuting out of an aircraft. You don't shoot the cockpit. You don't shoot pilots that have ejected. You don't do that. It's a big taboo. But even if you stuck around long enough and you managed to defeat security, or there's enough of you that they could keep security off your back in order to get the kill, if you end up getting caught and you can only run for so long, because again, the security system is not the only thing. The security service and everything also will impact bounty hunters, both players and NPCs. We'll get more into that. Yes, that Dibley, that's what Quarterdeck is. So here, we'll just read this. Quarterdeck is in the Kellogg system. It's Kellogg 6. The sixth planet from the sun of the Fair Chance Act protected Kellogg system, named for the maximum security prison located on its surface. It is covered with ice and is inhospitable to human life outside environmentally controlled facilities. An antimatter processing plant located near the penitentiary is staffed by inmates of Quarterdeck, some of whom volunteer for the job in exchange for reduced sentences despite its dangerous and sometimes deadly conditions. Yeah. So they talk about how you can work off your sentence in this deadly environment where dangerous and deadly environment where you can get injuries to your character, where you might even die and have to be regened and then put back into circulation at Quarterdeck. But it's not like Klesher's on Aberdeen, right? I forget. But it's entirely inhospitable. So if you are able to escape, it's entirely inhospitable, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. You're not in the middle of the Stanton system. You're way, way, way far out there, and the system isn't like it's connected to Odin. So, and this isn't the only one. There are other maximum security prisons mentioned in lore, and so there will be multiple places in game where depending on where you were, where you will get sent. And Escape from New York, anyone? Yep. Yeah. So Artec chill music. Yep. That's actually, thank you for reminding me. So like when I was in Iraq the first time, way back when, this is during the Battle of the Najaf in August of 2004. One of the saw gunners in 2nd Squad in my platoon, he took a 3-round burst from a PKM directly through his chest, stitching him right up his plate. Luckily all 3 rounds hit him on the plate, but the top and bottom hits were almost right on the edge. But his plate stopped all 3 bullets, thank God. Didn't penetrate, but he had a big old bruise on his chest. He had bruised ribs. He stuck it in the fight. He kept going for several days until we got out of there and went back to base and stuff. But he his plate was compromised after that. And so we always kept in one of our Humvees per platoon, we had a box of replacement plates. And so someone had to run back to the Humvee, after we checked him out, made sure he was okay and everything. And he's like, no, I can keep going. I can keep going. And he's like, it fucking hurts, but I can keep going. He had gnarly bruises. I've got the picture somewhere. Pictures of the plate and everything. And but we put a replacement plate into his flak jacket, and he kept going. Because if he had taken more rounds, the likelihood that that plate might have slowed the round down. The next round down, or 2 more rounds down, or something like that. But then it would have penetrated, gotten into his skin, and depending on how much it slowed it down, maybe it just gets lodged in the outer tissues and muscles and stuff. Maybe it breaks a few ribs, maybe it penetrates all the way, and you get a collapsed lung, or it hits, God forbid, it hits your heart or major vessels. That's how that shit works. But yeah, so not only is quarterdeck a just super horrible place to be, that's out in the middle of effing nowhere, but in Standard Earth Year 2943, so this was 13 years ago in game, Senator Gata Veras of Lo proposed that the prison and the planet be decommissioned due to its harsh conditions and track of human rights violations. That's how bad this prison is. They commit human rights violations there. That people are like, well, yeah, this is for the worst of the worst, but it's a really bad place. Only time it's acceptable to have a picture of another Marine's chest. Yeah. The proposal was defeated by a narrow margin, leading many political commentators to speculate that it'll be resurrected in the future. So that's CIG telling us that Klesher is the county jail where you go when you steal something that isn't of high value, commit a non-major violent felony. You're not a freaking terrorist. You don't go to Klesher when you're that person. You don't go to Klesher when you're a murder hobo, a griefer. You go to someplace like quarterdeck. You go to someplace like quarterdeck because security caught up with you, because you were spending your time trying to get the player kill on this, on Maelstrom ships, and you're too close to security, or you got away, but now you are a murderer, and the bounty hunters will eventually catch up with you. But let's talk a little bit more about how reputation factors into this, because being a murder hobo, we talked about how killing people unsanctionedly. It's not killing people. It's not you're headhunters and you go kill CFP. That's what will end up, have you end up in quarterdeck. It's like, no, if you are committing unsanctioned murder, or if you are killing people, that headhunters didn't say, hey, we didn't tell you to do that. That's where reputation factors in. So this is from the Living on the Edge presentation at CitizenCon 2953. Hopefully I got the timestamp right.
Reputation is a big topic for us, especially with Pyro. So reputation, what does it mean? It means that it's basically your standing, your relationship with factions, and factions are the UEE in Stanton, or outlaw gangs, especially now in Pyro. And this will define your play style within this environment. So it will define how you experience the location that you're in a more social context, or in a more combative context. So we talk about reputation gates as well, especially in the later presentations. So in the case of the food court, in the rundown station, we have multiple floors. So the first floor is the gang floor, and that might require you to have a better relationship with the owner of this location, which then will give you unique mission givers that you can go to and accept a mission, that are offering you missions themed after the faction or the owner of this location, but also give you access to unique gear, collectibles, ship weapons, and items. You might have seen these locations in the demo if you've played it. So to close this all off and move on to the other presentations, the glue behind all of our locations is the content. It is the reason why you go to these locations in the first place.
So that's for Pyro, and then there's more regarding reputation in the 1.0 presentation. So let's hear what they had to say. Hopefully I got the timestamp right again.
Guilds are hugely important in Star Citizen, and as you know by now, guilds are comprised of you will gain to items. Alongside, introduce David Haddock onto the stage.
Thank you. So yes, opportunity to finally several of ways. First, it's a narrative experience, taking Earth
Hold on.
and Terra.
I grabbed the wrong timestamp. Hold on. Let me pull up my show notes because that was the wrong timestamp. So. Where did it go?
On the flip side, we have the Council. Now, this is a shadowy group comprised of representatives from various gangs, syndicates, and outlaws who mandate criminal activity throughout the verse. You'll be able to throw in with rough and tumble gangs like the Headhunters and the Dead Saints, or work your way up to join highline criminal syndicates like the Atonis or the Drop Kings. But remember, the underworld is a dangerous place run by greed and power. So mercenary guild reps might not be the only people you have to worry about, as the syndicates are always looking for loyal soldiers who will hurt their competition and tip the scales of power in their favor. So as you can see,
So a lot of people have said, well, if I'm a murder hobo, if I'm griefing and everything, I'm just an unlawful player and everything, and I'll just go back to Pyro, go back to Nyx and stuff, because these criminal organizations, that I'm one of them. No, you're not. Tell me you don't know anything about these people without you actually telling me you don't know anything about them. CIG has talked about this on multiple occasions, but if you are doing violent murder hoboing, that isn't part of a sanctioned job, and you are bringing that heat back onto these factions, you will lose reputation with them, to the point where they will be like, you're insane, you're crazy, we're going to off you, or you're not welcome here. And we know that reputation is a huge part of progression. People, they've been talking about how crafting is sort of like a big means of progression, but not only that, but it's reputation. Reputation is a gateway to crafting and blueprints and stuff. If you don't have the reputation, and everybody says, oh, well, that's not how it is in game right now, because we have Reputation version 1. Reputation version 2 isn't in yet. Reputation version 2 is on the 1.0 roadmap. All of those things that they were talking about, how Pyro is going to work, how you are going to be excluded from certain places, how there will be reputation-based hostility and such, how these other gangs and everything will affect you, whether they even allow you, that's part of Reputation version 2. So the experience in Pyro for somebody who's a murder hobo, and a griefer, is not going to be what it is right now, because you are committing unsanctioned murder, and you are, and bringing heat onto their organizations, which negatively impacts their business. These guys are businesses, that criminal enterprises. They don't want the heat if they can avoid it. So let's look at a couple of these organizations. Just look at the lore for them. So the Otoni Group. Let's see. Where did it go? Okay. Controlled chaos. So structured more like a corporation than a gang, crime is a professional occupation for the Otoni Group. They can be every bit as deadly as their local counterparts, but they just factor in risk assessment and financial impact when making decisions about human lives. They are generally reticent to wreak violence, as it always attracts the most attention. But if havoc and death provide them with a win, they will not hesitate to pull a trigger. That's why these kill all, kill VIP missions and everything are on there, for violent criminal ship, violent criminal FPS. And it's so you can take out, competition. It's so you can take out, maybe a threat to them from, law enforcement or something like that, if they deem it, that important. But it's not so you can go around and killing, going around murdering people doesn't get you more rep with these organizations. It doesn't help you with them because they don't want that attention. That attention is bad for business. Um, the headhunters, obviously the headhunters are fighting CFP, and the other gangs in Pyro and such, but they are a smuggling organization. They are a group of smugglers. Um, they don't want that extra heat coming down on them. Same with the Drop Kings. That's why they had their rivalry. Oh, where'd that go? Sorry, I had these out of order. If you look at this piece, this is why CIG came out with all these lore pieces that they would put out. People are like, oh, it's just lore fluff. And it's like, no, it's them explaining to you how the universe is going to work. They're not writing out specifically how elements of gameplay will work, but what the universe that we are going to be living in Star Citizen is like, and how you interact with it. Yeah, architectural music. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Is it going to happen in 4.8? No. They're going to need to get more things in, but it's one of the iterative steps on the way there. Getting those resupply services in there, getting Reputation V2 in there, changing how all that sort of stuff works to allow them to achieve the vision that they've been setting out to implement. That's one part of it. But they're getting refuel in there and getting getting the NPCs responding to beacons in there as the getting this in so they can test that tech that makes that feature work before expanding upon that and adding to it, if that makes sense. Yeah, unlawful does not mean chaotic. Absolutely, escape. And you can be, chaotic evil. It's just going to make your life really hard, and that's the point. That's the point is, make a whole bunch of these things coming together to make people who are chaotic evil make their lives really hard, to make it very difficult for them to engage in that chaos, and that will make it so less people do it. And it's because right now there's no consequence to it. Yeah, or yeah, and if you you have that, maybe you have a Artec chill music, you have like a faction map, and you are in Headhunter's territory because you're doing a mission for CFP, or and vice versa, or maybe another gang. You're going to go take out someone, and you run out of fuel, or you take damage and your ship can't get off the ground or anything, and you need to call for help. Oh shit. You're behind enemy lines calling for resupply, calling for refueling, calling for rescue. What's going to happen then? And so it's not going to be as straightforward as if you're in Stanton where you have law enforcement coming. Maybe they don't cross that border to come get you. Maybe they'll only cross it if your rep is good enough. Maybe you're up shit creek, and the NPCs aren't going to come help you, and you have to figure something else out. We don't know exactly how that's going to work. We just know that they're going to work in similar ways, but different because of how Pyro and Nyx to a lesser extent are, but it's not going to be the way it is now. So let's read. This one is called Tracker Playing with Pyro. This one came out before Pyro was introduced, but this one is to help explain why the gangs in Pyro do what they do and why they're not going to be thrilled with you being a murder hobo. You're not going to be one of them. Let's see. So a question was, and this is like an interview, a panel interview. In your opinion, what's changed? Obviously, Xenothreat has become a dominant force. Nalagovia, these are bounty hunters. And so that's what Tracker is. It's a publication or a talk show for bounty hunters. There's certainly a factor. Violent gangs have been around Pyro for ages, but using the system to organize attacks on Stanton is a new wrinkle. So these pirates were generally preying on trade and such coming through into Pyro. They weren't organizing attacks into Stanton. That's a new thing with Xenothreat and Ninetales. And Ninetales has a lot more to it. They're not one of the traditional gangs. It says most Pyro gangs avoid intersystem operations that'll attract UEE attention. They'll do them, but much more discreetly than the Xenothreat. That way, they'll be left alone to control their own little areas of influence as they see fit. So if you are going into Stanton and murder hoboing like crazy, and being a griefer, you're going to attract UEE attention because murder is is very much frowned upon in the UEE. And it will, hey, Puppet07, good to see you. Yeah, exactly. If you want to grief, you are on your own. The game isn't going to help you like it will even somebody who's a pirate. If you want to be a griefer and a murder hobo, it's all on you. And that will severely hamper the population of people who do stuff like that. It will reduce that population significantly because most murder hobos and griefers aren't doing it because they want the challenge or anything like that. They most of them are not going to be dedicated to doing that. Like, it's going to be so much more work and so much more consequence that it's going to weed out so much of the chaff. The response to that was, it's why Pyro can be such a difficult system for outsiders to work. Gang allegiances and areas of influence are always shifting. Yeah. So if you're murder hoboing, you're going into Terra, Castra, Stanton in order to murder hobo people and everything, you're going to have to contend with security forces. It's going to be harder to murder people because of the security forces, because of Maelstrom making it difficult to actually kill somebody in their cockpit. We're going to have things like Maelstrom and engineering that make it so ships don't blow up and kill you instantly. There's going to be escape pods. Escape pods can, how they make it so escape pods can get away or aren't able to be tracked very easily or are difficult to destroy. They can do that with Maelstrom. They can do that with like a single time use, little quantum boost drive, all sorts of different things to make it so that way you can't just shoot escape pods willy-nilly, like it's no big deal. But Reputation V2 is on the 1.0 roadmap. It is a part of how this is all going to tie in. Well, it will be lawless in that people won't have security coming to get them, Puppet, but it won't be lawless in that there won't be people in, there's just going to be a different set of rules. You won't be able to be in headhunter territory and just go around murder hoboing people, unless it's sanctioned by the headhunters. You won't be able to, go into Stanton and murder hobo and then think you can just escape into Pyro and bring that heat. Yeah, Paul's talked about this sort of stuff. And it's because Paul, I'm just bringing up a couple of examples where this has been mentioned. There's so many more. And Paul knows this stuff because he's read all the same shit I have, but even more so. Yeah, the reputation system just isn't where it needs to be for it to do what they want them to do and do what they want it to do. But that's why it's only version 1, why we're working towards version 2. And your Pyro is going to be lawless, but Richard Tyler talked about it. There's, they've talked about it. Like, it's lawless in that there isn't a government security there. It's, but it doesn't mean that you can just go around being a murder hobo without consequence. Yeah, you'll lose rep. They might attack you. But that's why those missions are, for kill are sanctioned missions. You're killing someone for headhunters. If you kill another headhunter or you kill somebody that they're allied with, you're gonna lose rep. And so you're gonna, you can't just run around willy-nilly being a murder hobo. Well, in Puppet, it's not anything Ghosts. It's how it is in game right now. It's not how it's gonna be. There's gonna be gang territory and such, and maybe you won't get caught. But that's another part of the lore, is that if you commit a crime, if you murder someone and they regenerate, they report the crime. That's how they got around the idea of like, oh, well, I'll just kill them and they can't report the crime. No, that's in the lore. It's in the regeneration lore. That it's part of, like, there was the star-crossed lovers, and they were trying to escape from Hurston, and I forget what they stole, but like the buyer for it was a undercover agent, and they got in a gunfight, and one of the star-crossed lovers, was killed, and they killed the agent, and the agent regened and testified against them, and that's how no one claims it now. But I'm saying, like, everything will be, that, like, there isn't gonna be, I don't think there's gonna be parts of Pyro that aren't, uh, some sort of territory, and even if no one claims it, if you kill someone and they, it, like, you'll get negative rep with someone else. It isn't a no con. There isn't going to be any such thing as no consequence for murder. It might help you if they're an enemy of headhunters and you're with headhunters and you kill them. Okay, sweet. You might get a little bit better rep with headhunters, but it's going to hurt your rep with other places. And so, like, wanton murder hoboing is going to, negatively impact your rep and negatively impact your gameplay experience and limit your options. Exactly. Yeah, you don't go to the, some barrio, some, gang infested area in a city and just get to do what you want. The area isn't controlled by police, it is controlled by the gang. And the gangs will tell you what you can and can't do. You don't just go in there and, rob anybody, in their territory, because that's other things that these gangs do is they have protection rackets and such, and so, but what we have right now is just not the final implementation. And people need to understand that Reputation V2 is coming. The council is coming, and you're going to need to manage your reputation with these organizations in Pyro for you to be able to operate. And like, I forget who said it, maybe it was it Artec? If you don't manage your reputation, you just piss off everybody. Well, all right, then you're going to be on your own. And being on your own is going to be hard. And it's going to close so many doors to you that will leave you at a disadvantage compared to other people. We're the government, only we can rob people. So yeah, and this is one lore example of how murder is still frowned upon. You don't just kill people, and killing people with regen, with regen in there, it does, killing off the witnesses. It isn't like in Red Dead Redemption, where, oh, just kill the witnesses and it'll be fine. No, it doesn't work like that. That's, regen gets around that. So someone was asking about execution as punishment even exists. Would murder be as heavily punished as it is now? It would seem that in general, people would value life less, as death would not be final, blah, blah, blah. So the answer from the lore team: we know this question comes around a lot and is of great interest to the community. The narrative team actually dedicated one of our recent lore jams to elaborate on the subject of this question. And so after this came out was when that lore piece. First, the death penalty. This practice would be impacted by a regeneration check, but the death penalty itself has already been outlawed in the verse for hundreds of years. As for murder, the law has gone a simple route. It is the act of murder that is being punished. Whether someone successfully regenerates or not, the prosecution is the same. So, if they don't regenerate, okay, well, we may have knocked off the witness, but if they do regenerate, then they will testify against you. That's in a different lore piece. They'll report the crime, and you will get that negative hit on your rep. And so, like, murder is frowned upon. Killing ejected pilots and shooting escape pods is heavily frowned upon. And if people have imprints now, they're going to report it. And I assume that means that just everything's going to get reported. There might be some sort of delay mechanic, but you're not just going to be able to do whatever you want. And, well, no one saw it, so, it didn't happen. Yeah, currently the new Pyro, Stanton. Yeah, the only reason it exists right now is because there's no security response. But larger groups, will have their own industrial wings, but you'll have to care about rep, because if you don't have good rep, it will limit where you can go and set up your industrial base in order to fund this sort of operation, fund it and supply it. Like if you're running from the law and you're running from the gangs, you're always on. That's the part of it. You're running from the bounty hunters. Is that murder hobos? The idea is that murder hobos will always be on the run, because someone will be coming after them. Yeah, I auto report off. It's 99% of the time not what you want. Yep. So the next part that we're going to get into is ATC, air traffic control. We watched that video at the beginning where that griefer was, not even pad ramming. He was just ramming capital ships that were docked with a cutlass in order to grief those people. Well, again, with Maelstrom, those capital ships won't just blow up. And so that, you might do some damage by running into them with your cutlass, but your cutlass won't just blow up either. And so like them being able to do that to blow up your ship to kill the people on board won't work. They'll do some damage, but more likely than not, it will just cause that cutlass to break apart into pieces, kind of like the Gladius we saw running into the building, and cause some damage to the capital ship, but it won't blow it up. Not a big deal. But that probably, at space stations like that and at landing zones, that's not going to be possible. You won't be able to approach like that because of ATC. Well, and PubMaster server, dynamic server meshing is part of that. But we've got instancing and then dynamic server meshing, but we have to get that into play in order to allow for the NPC populations and NPC performance to be able to have that much NPC activity going on. Because it's one thing to have Star Sim running in the background, but for Star Sim to be able to impact the security response and do all that and send the bounty hunters after murder hobos, they have to have the server performance to be able to materialize, and physicalize those security forces and bounty hunters. So let's listen to what CR had to say about air traffic control 8 years ago, back in 2017. And then we'll hear about what Benoit just said about it last year.
Our attention, today's main feature, the air traffic controller system.
So we knew early on that it was vital to build a system that could manage traffic at landing zones and space stations to help juggle both the players that would be taking off and landing, but also the NPCs that would be coming through.
Not only will the air traffic controller system help keep landing pads organized, but the designers worked hard to keep the process as immersive as possible.
So let's take a look at what went into crafting this vital system and see how it will help keep you from landing a Starfarer on a landing pad that's way too small.
With the air traffic controller, we have tried to get a feeling of a realistic situation. So when in real life, when you have different planes coming to an airport, you need some kind of control, you need rules, you need a way of making sure everything is going to plan. So we have been trying to get the same behavior in Star Citizen. So up to now, when you approach a station, you just have to land, and that was it. Now you have to request landing, which implies a communication with someone, an NPC, which can be a real NPC or a automatic voice.
One hangar coming up.
Telling you where you can land, or if there's no space available, or anything like that. And there's also a control over how much you can stay in a landing pad, like security measures and so on.
Right now, players can just land everywhere they want. There's nothing controlling them. There's nothing saying, oh, you should park here. There's no rules to that. And we needed to find a system that basically coordinates landing, taking off, and also creating more immersion on what actually like flight controls are.
The concept behind our game is to be very realistic in what we do. So we do a lot of research in anything that goes on, and especially that definitely does not leave out the air traffic controller. So we've done a lot of research into what air traffic controllers do. When we were on set in filming in PCAP, it was really important, because the game.
Okay, so what we have for ATC right now is, again, not its final form. Just like Reputation, not its final form. This has always been part of the plan, is to have a more realistic air traffic control system. If you guys remember where we had the landing splines, and if you tried to fly out of that, it would take control of your ship, blah, blah, blah. It's coming back, folks. The game just wasn't ready for it. If you can imagine what the game will be like in 1.0, where we have dynamic server meshing, and not only that, but ATC right now is part of the hybrid service. So you have the dedicated game servers, 10 of them per shard or whatever it is now, that run the simulation, of the universe. And then you have the hybrid in the background, which is, connects to those servers, but also is what connects to players, and it connects to the entity graph for long-term storage. And so the hybrid service is not only the replication layer, but the hybrid service also has ATC. It has a number of other different services running on it that are individualized per shard. But it used to be that ran on, that everything on that hybrid was all on one server. The whole universe and all the hybrid stuff, everything on the hybrid, the replication layer, was all done by one server, along with the entire entity graph, the whole shebang. That's why the servers used to run like dog shit. That's why the landing splines and how that worked was such garbage back then, because we didn't have the performance for it to work. And the way the system was written couldn't handle the poor performance. That's why it worked for them internally, but out in the live environment where the servers are getting single digit FPS, it would just absolutely fuck with you, because the service is trying to run and control your ship, and manage all this on a server that is just absolutely getting flogged. So in the future with ATC, landing splines will come back in some form or fashion. They'll come back in some form or fashion. Well, it's not needed right now. It will be needed because, as CR talked about, they have to have a system that manages not only player traffic, but NPC traffic. We don't have any NPCs coming and going from stations, coming and going from landing zones. It's just a handful of players. That's why it isn't needed right now. It's why they haven't rewritten that system right now. But when we have, all the, when they had the NPC population coming in to make the universe feel alive, as well as 10 times more players per shard, if not more, you're gonna need you can't have the ATC system we have now with 10 times as many players and 10 times that many NPCs running around. It's meant to look congested and busy. It's why they haven't added more hangars and stuff, and more docking collars to stations and landing zones, because they don't need to with the game as it is right now, because there's no NPCs coming and going, and there's only a certain number of players. We only have 700 player shards. But when a shard suddenly goes from 700 to 7,000, or probably a whole lot more, you suddenly need, and obviously with the quantum simulation with Star Sim and that player to NPC ratio, that isn't physicalized NPCs all the time. That's all the quanta running around. There will be 10 times as many quanta running around in the simulation in the verse, but a lot of them will be physicalized in high density places like around space stations and landing zones. So you'll see that NPC traffic coming and going depending on how many players are coming and going, in order to have it give the appearance of being busy. And the ATC will be managing not only that player traffic, but that NPC traffic as they're coming and going to hangars and docking collars and pads and such. But the ATC system is meant to give to manage that traffic. it's not meant to do, the landing part, the hangar management part is going to be something completely separate. But that involves a version 2, a rework, an update of the ATC system. So let's hear what Benoit has to say about that, because it is going to be coming, but we're not there yet.
Okay. You said the transit system was your most despised system. I challenge you, sir, with the ATC.
Oh, man. Well, that's one of the casualties of this, right? I hate ATC like a passion. Its functionality is really cool, but it's one of those systems, a bit like transit.
Wait, it has functionality?
Well, yeah. It does. So on ATC, we haven't done a lot of work on it, mostly focused on metrics. And so ATC, right, is a system that you call when you want landing or when you want to leave, right? It is unfortunately responsible for hangar queues, and is also responsible to assign you a landing area and coordinate your instancing hangar. So basically create the instance manager for your hangar that creates the instance, and then manage the pad on your hangar. And so for ATC, while we're completely not happy with its stability overall or the queue times, which is the one thing that we're actually looking at the moment, is to make sure that the system works the way we want it. That's why we've put all these metrics in about at this location, the time to exit is this, at this location is this. Do we have enough gateway? Does the system perform the way it should? So we're still in an info gathering phase here to have the proper plan. But we do know one thing, is that we are going to change the way the interaction between ATC and hangars actually work. Currently, ATC manages everything. Like I said, it gives you your landing area. It says, hey, I need an instance at this gateway. Path spawns your hangar, instance created, all that stuff. Adds that instance tag to your player, then the doors open. Now you can get into your hangar, but now ATC sees the pad in your hangar as his landing area. He's managing this, right? And so he's taking care of all that stuff, which is a bit problematic because it's an old system. We know of its flaws. And so we do want to split these responsibilities so that there's a hangar manager.
Yeah.
So that the moment that you're done going through those doors, that's it, done. ATC's out of the picture. Now you're completely in your hangar, and the hangar manager takes care of this. And so that we've been doing tech design on this, but unfortunately, because of the different focuses we have this year, this is one casualty that I was not able to push forward on.
Yeah, there's some of these stations that have like 10, 15, 20 doors, but you'd swear the ATC only ever uses 1 or 2 of them.
Yeah, that's the one thing that we want to solve, even with the old system, before we even start hangar management.
Now, when you do the new system, ATC, air traffic controller, Star traffic controller, you call it Star TC. Star TC to go with Starport. Somebody suggested,
or maybe Starport does ATC too.
Star traffic controller, yeah. There you go. You're with me. The Star Troller. All right.
Dang it. Sorry. So this was the Star Citizen Live Tech Talk with Benoit that was 3 hours long back in September last year. So like we watched about in the previous video, they want a realistic ATC system that will manage the traffic between NPCs and players, because obviously there's going to be a lot more traffic than what we have right now. Am I coming through now? Yeah, okay, we're good. we not a lot more players, a lot more NPCs. We know about that 9-to-1 ratio. That 9-to-1 ratio is meant to make it so that way um, the universe feels full and alive. You're not, when you're at stations, you're going to see, in landing zones, you're going to see NPCs walking around. You see a lot of NPCs coming and going. Out in deep space, you're not going to see them. It'll be based off of probability volumes. But, Quanta will become subsumption NPCs based off of whether the probability volume determines that they need to be physicalized. But that traffic, those that probability volume around a space station will tell you that this many of those entities are physicalized and they are these ships and they are coming and going, and the ATC will need to manage that traffic along with the players. And so that's why this service needs to be separated from the hangar manager, so that way it has less responsibility, but also it can scale up and down based off of how many landing zones and stations and so on, and how much traffic it's having to manage. Just like the other services that are part of the hybrid now that will get separated out from the hybrid and the replication layer as we move on to dynamic server meshing, because those things have to scale dynamically, just like the dedicated game servers have to scale dynamically. But that ATC will make it so that way if you are approaching a station, you will be given an approach path and you will follow that approach path. And if you don't follow that approach path, you're going to get, yelled at, and then cited, and then, you might, maybe it's you follow this approach path and you can fly it yourself. Otherwise, it will take control of you. And people are like, well, I don't want to take control of my ship. Well, then follow the approach path. Congratulations. That's what happens with air traffic control in real life around airports, and it's not going to be an issue at the little outposts and stuff. And, this is nuts. But if you're coming to a space station, or a landing zone, and you request landing, you request to enter that airspace, that interaction is going to be controlled, and you can fly it. But as you fly it, that tunnel will get narrow, essentially narrower and narrower as you get closer to where you need to be until you come in and land. But that's what ATC is meant to be. That's what they talked about in the previous video. That's a huge way how pad rammers, people who are griefing, like the video we watched at the beginning of the show, that's a big way that you address that. Now, people are still going to do pad ramming at outposts and stuff like that. They can still do that, but then the ship might not actually even blow up. If you pad ram a capital ship or a big ship with a little light fighter, you'll do some damage, but you'll be the one that blows up and you might die. And then you've got that murder, or attempted murder charge on you, and you regen, and you'll lose rep, all that sort of stuff, for nothing. It takes all of you're removing the likelihood of the griefer getting the reward that they want, while making it that much harder for them to do it, which will make it so that way people who are playing as griefers and murder hobos have a much harder time actually doing so, and it will weed out so much of the chaff. Someone asked a question and I missed it. Yeah. So ATC is a big part of this, especially if you're getting, pad rammed or griefed or something like that, like we saw in that video. So let's talk about Quantum and the security service, and how that tracks everything, because this is still valid. People are like, oh, well, Quantum is dead, Star Sim is dead. No, it's not. It's on the 1.0 roadmap. It is working. It runs in isolation in the background. It's just not hooked into everything because the game isn't ready for it yet. So let's listen to what Tony Z had to say about Quantum back in 2019.
Area, and the nodes are updated to reflect that fact. It's a ton of work, and while this sort of hand tweaking does yield something that feels vaguely logical, if static, it's definitely not a real solution, and it doesn't even begin to address the major problems. Now we come to the last of the major areas for which I wanted to illustrate the problems that we currently face. So, what is a probability volume? A probability volume is an area of space that contains information detailing what you should see as you pass through the area. It's an optimization of sorts in that it allows us to achieve a desired effect a certain number of pirates in an area or a particular likelihood of encountering a freighter filled with iron ore without having to burn a lot of computational horsepower simulating things when there are no players around to see it. This is accomplished via linking mission content tags to probability curves that span all or part of the expanse of the volume. So, for example, you can denote that security ships are commonplace near Port Olisar and gradually fall off over a couple hundred kilometers, whereas it's very rare to see pirates who would prefer to avoid security close to Port Olisar, but more likely to see them as you get farther away. There are quite a few different types of curves denoting, because until a player actually accepts one of these missions and heads to that location, there are a variety of probabilities. I think some of our notes got screwed up here. Anyway, so one of the more interesting types of curves is the spoofing curve, which allows missions to skirt the normal rules, requiring that they can only be created in the proximity of a player. And this is done so that an NPC can request that you travel to them to provide something they desire, in which case, obviously, we can't limit them to only existing in yours or another player's immediate proximity. This is how combat assist is currently handled, and we'll be adding some other things like NPC refuel and NPC passenger transport in the near future. The reason it's called spoofing is because we only keep a small stub active on the back end, which is way more efficient. We've got other types of curves. There are reinforcement curves that allow designers to dictate how quickly backup tends to arrive when you've been identified as a felon. And we also have the ability to modulate that time according to how far away you are from the place you were last spotted and how long ago that was. There are bounty hunter curves, which allow us to link to a probability, which allow us to link a probability to your wanted level so that we can increase the encounter frequency when they'd actually be hunting you and otherwise keep them very rare.
That's the key right there. So if you have been a murder hobo, if you've been bad and you've been griefing like crazy, the bounty hunters are hunting you. The security service is chasing you. So even if you escape security, you get out of Stanton, you escape from the lawful security, the bounty hunters are still hunting you. There's still a probability curve. There are still probability volumes in Pyro. There's still probability volumes in Nix and other unlawful systems. The bounty hunters will still come after you there, whether it's players or NPCs. And the worse you are, the more likely that will manually change the probability volume for you that an NPC bounty hunter will spawn and come after you. And the more of them you fight, the more of them that you destroy or kill or something like that, that ratchets up that essentially bounty hunter response, and there will be more and more bounty hunters coming after you. They'll be more and more likely to get interdicted and have them catch up with you. And so you're not going to be able to go on this murder spree and then just move about freely, even in Pyro, because the bounty hunters will come there for you. We read about that lore in the tracker thing, it says in here that bounty hunters still operate in Pyro, and it requires, you can't just be any old bounty hunter. You can't be a new guy or anything like that. But you sometimes you have to go into Pyro to get the mark and such. And so that's why this stuff is important, because people think, oh, well, it's NPC security, I'll just escape to Pyro. The bounty hunters are still going to come after you. The security service, the law, security system, that manages law and all that stuff, the reputation system, how bad you've been, will determine how much those bounty hunters come after you, and they will still pursue you into Pyro. They will eventually catch up with you, and your bounty will continue to go up, which incentivizes more players and more bounty hunters to come after you, NPC bounty hunters to come after you. So it's not the way it is right now is not the way it will be when all these things come into play. And all of these things are part of the 1.0 design. But people look at these systems in isolation and they don't see how they come together to form a holistic system that mitigates that behavior. It doesn't remove it entirely. Some people will still be like, oh, this is hard mode, I still want to do this. I'm going to provide my own support like you guys talked about in chat. I'll have my own industrial base, with my other griefer friends and everything, and we'll operate together, we'll protect each other. But it's going to be really difficult. The law will be after you. The bounty hunters will be after you. Even other either other unlawful organizations will be after you. You won't be allowed in a lot of different places. you're going to be shoot on sight. You won't be able to get any of the support services that you need. When you do get caught, you're going to end up in quarterdeck, way out in the middle of nowhere, so you won't be able to just easily escape like you can from Klesher, and you're right back into circulation. There's so many levers and systems that levers CIG can pull, and systems that they are either already actively working on or have had plans on for ages and are slowly implementing those plans, that are all part of the 1.0 vision that will help to mitigate this. So let's hear what Tony Z had to say in this is the 2021 presentation on quantum quasar and virtual AI and how this affects bounty hunting. Just a little quick clip right here.
Bounty Hunter V2 will be the first feature to exploit virtual AI, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg insofar as what we eventually plan to do with it. Some of the virtual AI tech foundation will beget other important features, like the ability to dynamically adjust the size and composition of the populations at landing zones. Dynamic events are the culmination of several major technological components coming.
So good old Bounty Hunter V2. Bounty Hunter V2, enabling players to, they did a lot of development on this, but the only problem is this is contingent on StarSim and the security system. They can't implement Bounty Hunter V2 until we have StarSim, unfortunately. And it really sucks. We're going to look at why it is. But they did a ton of development on Bounty Hunter V2, and they thought it was coming. Been pushing for it for a while, but it just didn't materialize because they thought that once server meshing came in, then they could turn on quantum, now StarSim, and it'd be ready to go. But they decided that we couldn't turn on StarSim yet. The game isn't ready for it, so we're still waiting on Bounty Hunter V2. But Bounty Hunter V2 is still a thing. So enabling players to track criminals via a mobiGlas security app linked to distress beacons, comm arrays, air traffic control systems, cameras, and NPC informants. This will rely on various new backend tech, including the virtual AI, NPC scheduler, and security service. NPC tracker service, the security service. So StarSim, again, part of the 1.0. Hey, Victoria07. Oh. Hey, everybody. So Victoria sent me a really nice note. Get well soon. I hope the family is well note because of my shoulder, and had these coins made. Let's see if I can put that up on the screen. So it's hopefully it's focused enough. Sent me a coin. Pretty sweet, huh? Thanks, Vic. Really appreciate it. Yeah. I've got a budding collection of Star Citizen challenge coins. Northern Trooper was there, but we had our Bar Citizen Boise event the other month, and we had some friends come up from the Bar Citizen Boise group down in Salt Lake City, and they gave me one of their Utah Star Citizen coins. It's going to be hard to see because the light on it. It's pretty cool. It looks a lot cooler in the good light. Oh, lots of people have said that Quantum is dead. StarSim is dead. That they're gonna. People don't hear about things, and so they assume it's dead, without understanding the context of it. And then I just point to it that they've mentioned it in the 1.0 presentation. It's on the 1.0 part of the roadmap. They've mentioned it since then. It's like, no, no CIG people. Yeah, just, players, backers have said stupid shit because they don't pay attention. Law and security, right there. This is the law and security system. StarSim will use the law and security system and the other services that are part of it in order to allow the Bounty Hunter V2 to work. Bounty Hunter V2 is just the player-facing side of it. But those services, along with StarSim, are what allow for not only, Bounty Hunter V2 for players, but also for NPC bounty hunters to track you down and affect that probability volume that you will encounter them if you've been a bad person. What did you say? I wasn't paying attention. Don't believe in reading. Oh, geez. I don't even know what you missed. So in order to wrap this up, the last part is finding out where we're at with quantum. So this was a post from Benoit, Balt CIG, October 25th, 2023. So 2.5 years ago. Someone asked Quanta and the economy. First off, thanks for a great CitizenCon, and congrats to CR and all the amazing devs for what they achieved. I was, however, surprised that there was no mention of Quanta or the economy. You weren't the only one. I was there, and we were all surprised too. Northern Trooper, we talked about this at that point. When can we expect an update? Is Tony Z still alive? The director emeritus, Tony Z. Well, it's not dead. Tony Z did his work, but it's not dead. It's just not hooked into Star Citizen because of these reasons. And Tony Z was just one person working on it. The big Q&A about StarSim, about Quanta back in the day, when Tony did where'd it go? Did this presentation, the other guy sitting next to him is from Turbulent. The other guy, whatever his name was, I forget, Jake Mueller or something like that, is from Turbulent. He works with Benoit. Benoit is his boss. Benoit is now responsible for Quantum StarSim. That's his purview. But the Tony Z was the designer, one of the principal designers, the director over it. But the people writing it, the people that actually built it, are the Jake Mueller or whatever his name is. There we go, Jake Mueller, right there, and the other people from the Turbulent team that wrote the code, that designed the whole thing and built it. And so, but here's what Benoit said. Here's a quick summary of my answer on that stream for you all. The Quanta simulation is in a good place at the moment, but lives in a closed system. So it runs, it does what they showed it do, it showed it doing, but it isn't attached to Star Citizen, to the PU right now. We want the sim to make a difference to your play experience, and so for the moment, have paused its development in favor of developing the gameplay systems the game needs for the sim to hook on, economy and otherwise. The server meshing work also has a very large impact on how the sim communicates with the game state, so have thus prioritized other work in the short term until we can come around and make the simulation affect live gameplay and make a difference like we intended since the beginning. We'll post more when we have accurate, more concrete information to share. So people complain about missions getting broken when we get a new patch. They're like, oh, we just got these missions 2 patches ago and now they're already broken. The majority of the dynamic content in Star Citizen, all the the majority of the really narrative driven missions that we play in Star Citizen, those will be driven by StarSim. Those will be StarSim communicating to the mission service to generate this mission, and the mission service will put the modules together based off the information from StarSim. Imagine if StarSim was running everything right now, with development from server meshing, with Genesis coming along and us getting, Planet Tech with Starkitect locations and, all the economic nodes that go with, and the lacking security service we have right now, and blah, blah, blah. Imagine if StarSim was running 80-90% of our gameplay that we do in game right now, that isn't sandbox, and the hooks for StarSim connecting to things within the servers and everything that are doing the simulation of the universe and the backend services that it talks to. Imagine if those things got disrupted. And a huge portion of the game is just gone, broken when it goes live. More than just a handful of missions not working because there's bugs and stuff, and the mission system is, we're on our way to mission system V2. That's why. It's because the game isn't ready for StarSim to be hooked into it, economy or otherwise. Because it isn't just the dynamic economy; it's everything. It's the entire simulation of the universe. So that's why we don't have StarSim. But StarSim is a huge part of what drives these others, some of these other systems that we talked about that will counteract and help to negate griefers and murder hobos. Is it going to be a perfect system? No, there are still going to be those really dedicated people, those really dedicated groups that will go out and do it. It's just because they can, and it's a challenge. But the vast majority of them will be turned off by how difficult it is to do so, how difficult it is for them to get the reward they're looking for because of Maelstrom, how they're constantly being hunted by security, and bounty hunters, how they won't be able to get NPC support, in a lot of places, if any, and they'll have to provide a lot of their own infrastructure. And a lot of those people are combat players that don't want to do all this infrastructure industrial gameplay to provide for their own support services. You have GrieferNet camping Obituary this very moment on my server. Yep. And GrieferNet will still be around, but the presence of GrieferNet will get, I'm very confident that GrieferNet will take a big hit. There are a lot of people who'll be like, yeah, this isn't fun anymore. And they'll just quit. And there'll be a core group of them that will persist. They're really dedicated, sadistic psychopaths, because that's what they are. They're sociopaths is what they are. But they're really dedicated sociopaths. But some, the people that are just there for quick and easy grins, those are people who are going to get, might even leave the game. But those people aren't going to persist through all of these obstacles that prevent them from pad ramming people, that prevent them from just committing rampant murder, or make it that much more difficult for it to do so. And this isn't everything. This is just a detailed look at the biggest aspects of the systems and tech and lore. A lot of it's lore, because the lore is what influences how these systems work and why they are the way they are. That will help to mitigate this, that will help to change the landscape of how Star Citizen is played. And it's not going to be the way it is right now. There are going to be a lot more consequences. Another one of those consequences is death of a spaceman. Death of a spaceman is coming. It's part of the 1.0 roadmap. Regen isn't going to be, we're not just going to always constantly respawn. When that, if you crash into somebody's ship trying to make it blow up, they don't blow up, they don't die, they take some damage, your ship blows up, you regenerate, and you regenerate in prison, or you regenerate, or you end up doing the full big die death of a spaceman, and all your skill progression goes away. That's going to negatively impact their experience. And the more CIG does that negatively impacts their experience, the fewer people will do this. Will it still happen? Yeah. Is it going to happen like it is right now? Absolutely not. Not even close. But that is everything that I have to say about how CIG can mitigate and combat griefing. Is it all going to happen soon? No. It will be iterated on, and we will get there slowly but surely. But patch after patch, feature after feature, tech hurdle after tech hurdle, we will get there, and the situation will improve over time. It sucks being patient. I'm with you. I get griefed. I get murder hoboed. But it will continue to get better, just like everything else. So let's go ahead and switch screens. Go back to this, because now we have to pay it forward and find someone to raid on Twitch. Again, I want to call out Escape for gifting those 20, was it 20 subs? Is that right? Because we're up to 35 subs right now, gifting all those tier 1 subs. I really appreciate all that support. That is absolutely huge. This week, I promise, I will make my my payouts. Those donations, so you'll be able to see the updated raised dollar amount down at the bottom. All the subs: Jersey Mike's, Blimpies, Subway. Okay, maybe not Subway. Yeah. The Prisoner says, I assume you'll be able to lose bad rep with death. That depends. we don't know if your rep is going to completely reset or if you're going to, only lose part of your rep. They've talked about how, because it's like the next of kin thing, you're this person's son, and so like sins of the father type thing. And so like the big death means that you will lose your skill progression, but they've talked about how you would likely lose some of your reputation. Yeah. The big die, if you guys read Galaxy's Edge, the big die, um, perchance to dream. Yeah. But yeah, and we don't know exactly how these things will come together in perfect detail, but we can get a good 30K foot view of how these things come together and how it all work. I am intending to stream hopefully again Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but I'm going to start mixing it up between Windrose and Star Citizen, get back into the blueprint hunting or whatever else anybody's interested in. So if you want to group up in game, in the evenings, I generally can't get on until 10 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Mountain, because that's when my kids and family and my wife go to bed. But if you're interested in coming hanging out on the stream, I always post about it in the Discord, and then you can subscribe or follow to get notifications. But if you want to join me, I also post the events in the Discord, so I'd love to get together in game, whether it's in Windrose or Star Citizen, and group up and go do some stuff. I want to do some more blueprint hunting, but I'm game for anything. So if you want to do some industry stuff, you want to do breaker stations or Vanduul tech smugglers or whatever, hit me up. I'm always open for suggestions. Yeah, I think people have to take a more active role in changing their rep. If you do the big die, you'll lose some of that negative rep, you lose some of your good rep. But I think if you want to reverse that negative rep, you're going to have to actively manage it. Yeah, 07 Artec Chill Music, thanks for stopping by. A lot of people in we were up to like 52 people between YouTube and Twitch. We're still at around 40, which is big numbers for me. So I really want to say how much I appreciate the support from all you guys and everybody stopping by and hanging out. Lots of conversation in chat. Lots of people sharing their thoughts, which I love to see. But let's go ahead and find someone to raid on Twitch, because it's important to me to pay the love forward. I get a lot of love paid forward to me from other people. As far as I know, YouTube doesn't have a raid function, right? It's just Twitch. I'm still learning about streaming on YouTube, so I apologize, because it's still very new to me, and I don't know how everything works. So yeah. Oh, I need to. Oh, okay. So the emote. Okay, that one works. I do have emotes on YouTube. Oh, they're not animated. They're static. Come on, YouTube. Get your shit together. Okay, but let's find someone to raid on Twitch. Pay the love forward. Let's see. If anyone has any suggestions, I'm always game for suggestions. Let's see. Looking to see if there's anybody that I follow who's playing Star Citizen. I follow St. Brutus, but they're playing Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord. Oh, Chachi Sanchez is playing Star Citizen. Any suggestions? Oh, thanks, Artec Chill Music. I appreciate it. Yeah. If you're not already in the Discord, absolutely. The Discord invite is always open. The link is on my YouTube homepage, and as well as my Twitch homepage. So those links should still be open. So let's raid Chachi Sanchez. He's raided me. I've raided him. Oh, I wonder. Oh, it looks like he's got his VR setup going on. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's check that out. All right, let's start the raid. And again, everybody on YouTube, thanks so much for stopping by and showing your support. I really appreciate it. YouTube and Twitch, you guys are great. And I will hopefully see you guys again soon. All right. 20 raiders raiding. Raid now. Cheers. Goodbye.